The golden age of innovation in the chemicals and materials industry seems to be behind us, replaced by an era of manufacturing growth through financial engineering. Or is it? Welcome to today's webinar, Tech Innovation in an Age of Financial Engineering. My name is Rachel Darasek. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Product Strategy at Lux, and I'll be your host for today. Our presenter is Matt Wagner, a Senior Analyst at Lux in our materials area of expertise. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Rachel. Again, my name is Matt Wagner. I'm a PhD chemical engineer, and I've spent about 20 years of my career mostly in innovation in large chemical and materials companies, and I'm excited to talk to everyone today.
Thanks, Matt. So to build a little tension and anticipation before Matt shares his insights, let's take a moment to provide some context. I think everyone who's with us today can agree that revenue growth is a requirement for business, full stop. There are many ways to achieve that required growth, and financial engineering is certainly one legitimate option. However, financial engineering is not going to drive the breakthrough growth that we are all seeking. Achieving this type of growth requires true innovators to identify, evaluate, and apply technologies in novel ways, and even sometimes to creatively look for new ways to drive growth beyond the usual suspects, new products, and new markets. Since revenue growth is a requirement, what do you do to overcome these hurdles and succeed in this environment? How do you decide what technologies are right for your organization to prioritize, who to work with, and when to act, and to do it quickly and reliably? That's where Lux comes in. We partner with teams at global Fortune 500 companies in physical industries such as materials, energy, and food, health, and wellness to deliver on your next innovative ideas. We use advanced analytics techniques such as data science and machine learning to track all the information. We curate the data based on domain knowledge, and we pair it with expert insight to challenge, validate, and complement your in-house knowledge, ultimately helping you make better decisions faster. So with that, let's turn our attention over to Matt, who's going to give us the Lux take on how materials and chemicals companies can innovate beyond financial engineering. At the end of the webinar, we will take a few questions. If you'd like to submit a question, please use the questions pop-up box on the bottom right of your screen. And remember, you can enter your question at any time, and we'll get to them at the end. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. And I also want to thank everyone who's on the line. I really do appreciate your time. So with the talk today, I'm going to really talk about three different things. So here's an agenda. So first, I'm going to talk about what I really mean by financial engineering, how this is affecting the chemical industry, why it's happening, what the implications are for R&D leaders. Then I'm going to move on and talk about tech innovation. Even in this financial engineering, the steelmaking world, tech innovation is still required for success. I'm actually going to show you some data that strongly suggests that. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about, again, in this time of financial engineering, where the opportunities for technical innovation lie. So I've been using this quote in presentations for probably 3 years now, and I really love it. So the quote is, I'll read it, is all we are doing is trading the same 52 cards back and forth, trying to come up with this best hand. And this is from a major chemical producer who's also a Lux client. And here in this hand, you see, assuming this is a poker hand, what you're looking for is the 10 of hearts. And really what this is getting at is what big chemical companies and medium-sized chemical companies and material companies are doing is rather than relying on tech innovation, what they're relying on is deal making to really achieve top-line growth. I'm going to go through a few slides to just show you what I mean by that. So one thing that's been getting a lot of press over the last few years is really major M&A activities. Probably the two biggest here are Bayer and Monsanto has gotten a lot of press, as well as Dow and DuPont. So you have these major companies coming together. Gets a lot of attention in the press. Along with this merging, you also get companies who are spinning things off. Again, a big part of a lot of attention is on Dow DuPont, and this year they're going to be splitting into 3 entities. So Corteva, which is focusing on ag science, and then a new DuPont and a new Dow. And we actually have a report on that. Probably the most recent one out of all of these is AkzoNobel, who is spinning off their specialty chemical business. So again, these get a lot of press as well. But along with these big deals, there's just kind of an underlying churn where, these big chemical material companies are really trying to kind of, on a year-by-year basis, optimize their business portfolio. So here's an example from the Belgian-based global chemical company Solvay, and what you have is a list of investments and a list of divestments. This goes back to 2001, but really we're really focusing on really what's happened over the last maybe 10 years or so. And you see they've made a series of investments, and what they're trying to do is move their business into lightweighting, especially polymers, primarily for automotive. And while they're moving into that, they're getting out of kind of these non-advantaged positions in commodities. So along with these big deals that get a lot of press, again, you have lots and lots of underlying deal making going on as well. So why is this all happening? Well, one of the things, again, I've spent my career in R&D. I'm a PhD chemical engineer. I really love the whole process and the whole experience of, drawing on your whiteboard and coming up with an idea and driving all that all the way to commercialization. It's exciting. And I think when you set in kind of this technologist position, one of the things is when you see this focus on deal making, when you see that this is what the C-suite is interested in, you tend to think like, oh, it's the finance guys who've taken over, the accountants are running things, and you kind of look at this as some sort of outside thing coming on into the industry. But I'm going to tell you that's really not the case. This financial engineering really is a symptom. Again, it's not evil finance people. It's a symptom of kind of an underlying condition, an underlying disease. And what that is, that underlying condition, is just the nature of the chemical industry and the material industry today. It's these basic fundamental aspects of the market is really what's driving companies to get excited about financial engineering. So what I'm going to do in the next 4 slides, I'm just going to walk through both kind of looking at the industry from an organizational perspective, kind of how the companies are organized, and also look at it from a technology perspective, touching on a few key features, and then you'll see how these kind of key features are driving the industry to financial engineering. So first, to start off on organization, the main organizational feature is this industry operates at a very, very large scale, right? Huge volumes of chemicals and materials are produced for these companies. So what that means is if you really want to move the financial needle, you have to have really, and you focus on products, you have to have really, really big products, really big volume. Now, along with having big volume from a given company, all these companies are highly integrated, right? There's a very highly interconnected, well-established supply chain where competitors are also suppliers and they're also customers. So in this whole transaction network, it's really hard for an outside player to come in and disrupt this industry. Now I'm going to move on to 2 technical features. So the first one is that the applications are mature. And again, as an R&D professional, this is one of those things when you talk about mature applications, you tend to feel kind of negative or this is a bad thing. But I actually mean this is actually a really positive thing, that the industry has done a fantastic job of meeting customer needs. The industry is able to offer chemicals at a good cost that perform well, that are with a reliable supply and with a high quality. So, the industry has done a really, really great job of meeting these customer needs. And so with this, again, this makes it difficult to come in with a new thing that's really superior, again, because the existing solutions are actually quite good. And then lastly, again, on technology, is there's really a high barrier to entry. And it really comes from 2 things. One is you need a lot of expertise to design a plant, build it, operate it, maintain it, all that. A tremendous amount of experience needed to do that. And you also need a lot of money. And this is an ethylene cracker. And these things, billions of dollars go into this. So you combine all of these things, and you get a sense of what's going on in the chemical industry today. Again, it operates at large scale. There's a highly connected supply chain. The applications are mature, and there's a high barrier to entry. So what does this really mean? You put all this together, what it does is it really inhibits tech-based growth. It really says that if you're trying to have a big increase, a major increase in your top line revenue, right? You really want to move that needle and grow your business 10%, grow your business even 5%. It's really hard to do that except if you do this deal making. So this is why C-suite level people are spending their time focused on deal making, because this is how you grow today. So what does that mean for R&D leaders? Well, this is the world that you have to live in. Again, it's not that financial engineering is some some arbitrary thing that's been imposed upon us and it's going to go away. This is the world that you have to live in if you're an R&D leader in this industry, and this is how it's going to come for many years to come. So what does that mean for you? And again, if you're trying to innovate in this space, first of all, there's just intense competition. It's natural that organizations want to survive. It's much better to be the acquirer rather than the acquired. So the level of competition, which is in an industry that's already highly competitive, is just going to increase and increase and increase. So you're going to face a much tougher challenge because of that. Next, along with competition, is you're going to face tighter budgets. Most of these big major deals, part of the way they're justified is on synergies, which means cost savings, right? Which means reduced budget, reduced headcount. So the competition is going to be more intense, and most likely you're going to have less resources to meet these challenges. Then lastly, you're going to have fractured businesses. And I think this is probably the toughest thing. So as these organizations, these businesses get traded back and forth, you lose people, right? People can't make the move to the next company for a whole bunch of reasons. When you lose those people, you lose knowledge. And also when you're starting to lose people, the morale of the people who are left really, really suffers. So you have this really difficult thing to do, and you're losing knowledge and you're losing morale as you do it. Again, a really big challenge. So now that I've kind of hopefully scared you a little bit about that tech innovation is going to be really difficult now and in the foreseeable future, I'm going to lay another thing on you, which is even though it's really difficult to do, and even though C-suite people are looking at deal making, tech innovation is still needed for success. And the way I'm going to show this through is actually a data-driven analysis, one of the things that Lux loves to do. So again, as I said, deal making is going to continue, but you have to do tech innovation. And the analysis tool I'm going to show you is called the Lux Competitive Benchmark, or the LCB. And there's a whole long report on that to get into the details of how this is done and kind of the results that we've got out of it. Here I'm just going to do kind of a high-level discussion of what this analysis tool is and what we found out from looking at the chemical material industry. So what this LCB does is it rates innovation effort on a 1 to 5 scale and plots it against business execution. And for innovation effort, what we mean is this is the effort that the company puts forward to developing and implementing new technology. And again, this is not our analysts making some sort of a subjective analysis of it. It's really data-driven. And here's the data that goes into it. When we look at the internal metrics, kind of the internal innovation that a company does, we look at its R&D spending and its patents. But we also look at its external innovation, looking out and partnering with people. So that's on acquisitions, investments into startups, partnerships with other companies, and also publications. Now, the business execution, that's simply a company's business performance. And for that, we use pretty standard business measures. We look at profitability, liquidity and solvency, growth rate, and acquisitions. And then lastly, reading this chart, the size of the dot, the bubble size is the total revenue. So a bigger company has a bigger dot. Now, with all of that, here is the LCB for large diversified chemical and material companies. And there's roughly 20 companies on this slide. And this one looks a little bit scattered, but I'm going to walk you through and show you that it really isn't that scattered. There really is this core group kind of in the center that goes from Arconic and up through like 3M, right? And here what you see is innovation effort is generally correlates with business performance. So the more effort you put into innovation, the better your business is going to be, again, for this kind of core group here in the center. There are some exceptions, as you see. I'm going to talk a little bit about them to explain those for you. There are some of these companies like DSM who are a larger percentage of their business are kind of in high table stakes areas, particularly pharmaceuticals and electronic materials. So in these businesses, just kind of your R&D spend just naturally has to be higher in those kind of markets. And because they have a higher percentage of their business in those kind of markets than your standard kind of commodity and specialty chemical material player, they're a little higher in terms of innovation effort. There's also 3 companies here that, although a relatively low in innovation effort, certainly below average, are doing quite well from a business perspective. And these are all due to kind of temporary things, kind of where they're in a highly cyclic business and they're at a high end, or there's some temporary situations that go that account for this. But again, you really do have this core group of people where, again, innovation effort correlates with business performance. So that's where we say, even today, even when all this financial engineering is going on, you really do see that tech innovation is required for business success. Now I'm going to move to the last part of the talk, and here I'm going to talk about what opportunities exist for tech innovation. And again, in this time of deal making, how do you innovate technically? And the main thing, again, going back to why do we have financial engineering? It's because of the underlying nature of the industry. Again, scale, interconnected supply chain, mature applications, and a high barrier to entry. All of this combines to make it really difficult to do traditional product innovation. It's really hard to come up with a new product and really grow your business from that one new product. So, going back 100 years ago with the Haber-Bosch process for ammonia, I mean, those kind of days are over. Even kind of the days of Carruthers coming up with nylon, or later on aramid fibers at DuPont, or acrylonitrile at Ohio. Those sorts of things where the chemical industry was kind of built on. Those days or those opportunities are really limited going forward. So then what do? Well, here at Lux, we see that what you need to do is you need to innovate the non-product parts of your business model. So this kind of begs the question of what is a business model and all of that. Again, we have a long report that gets into a framework of how do you look at a business model. And in our framework, there are 8 features or 8 parts of what creates a business model. One of them certainly is the product, but there's these 7 other aspects of it that are not the product, right? And it's those areas that are really exciting to innovate right now. So I'm going to talk about 2 opportunities or 2 kind of ways to innovate on the non-product part of it. So first is improve your customer's experience. So the idea here is you're going to sell them the same product, but you're going to improve their experience. You're going to improve how they interact with you, how you interact with the product, right? So that's a really fruitful area. And then the second fruit area, and this is probably kind of the thing that I'm actually most excited about, is your own organizational innovation. You're able to do things differently organizationally and improve your ability to execute R&D projects. And what's exciting about this is, you can come up with a new product or a product extension or something like that. You wait 6 months and your competitor is going to copy it, right? But you come up with a new way of working internally, you change how you think about things, how you analyze stuff. That's going to be really, really, really hard for your competitors to copy and really give you a sustainable advantage. So for each of these, I'm just going to give you one example. So again, on the customer experience, I'm going to example, and this is for the Finnish company Kemira. They make water treatment chemicals, and they also do chemicals for pulp and paper treatment. So here what they're doing is what they've done is they're using a suite of sensors and then data uplinks to charge customers based on the volume of water treated rather than the chemicals consumed. So the conventional revenue model, right, is they would, a customer would go and buy bulk chemicals. Those chemicals would get delivered to the water treatment facility, and then the treatment facility, of course, would pay, right? Here it really changes the revenue model, where really what you're doing is you're basing what they charge their customers is based on the use of those chemicals, the volume of water treated. From a kind of an accounting standpoint, what you're kind of doing is you're shifting the working capital from the water treatment facilities to Kemira, and their clients really, really like this. So again, what you've done, it's the same application, it's the same product, all that's the same, but you've really changed how your customer works with you and the customer's experience. Again, and this one particularly around revenue model. Now I'm going to give you one example on organizational innovation, internal organization example. And this is coming from the German special chemical company Evonik. And for about a decade or so, they've been establishing these things called project houses. So these are standalone temporary R&D organizations that are outside of any of their existing facilities. Typically, they're cited on an academic, institution. And what they do is they identify hot areas, hot topics. And for this one, this is the last one they did. This was from last year. And this is in Singapore, and this project house is focused on tissue engineering. And what this kind of cool little organizational trick they do, it allows them to do 2 things. One, it allows them to kind of get their feet wet in some cutting-edge research area, and they have generated some interesting products out of these project houses. But another thing, I think almost even more important, is it really attracts new researchers. They're able to engage, young academics at the site, at where they are, and they're able to bring new people into their organization. And when it's all is said and done, you can be very strategic and very thoughtful analyses, but the best way to do well is to have really, really good people. And this is a really interesting organizational kind of trick to attract new people. And now I'll just wrap up with a few takeaways, and these are going to kind of correspond to the 3 parts of my talk. So first, financial engineering is here to stay in the chemical material industry. It's not going away. And second, because of this financial engineering, this is going to make corporate tech innovation even more challenging, but as the LCB shows, you still need it for business success. And then lastly, again, in this time of deal making, look for opportunities outside traditional product innovation. Look at other parts of your business model to innovate. Here I gave some examples on revenue model and organizational design, but you can also think of other areas like your position in your value chain, how you meet, mass customization to meet, individual product requirements. It's a whole slew of things that you can really do to look at and innovate, just again, outside coming up with a whole new product. And with that, I really thank you and your time and attention, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Matt. That was, you scared me and then you gave me hope. Hopefully did the same for the folks who are joining us.
That was the intent.
So now it's time to turn to the Q&A part of the webinar. As a reminder for those who are joining us, please type your questions into the questions pop-up box on the bottom right of your screen. I see a bunch of questions that came in while you were talking, so let's get to the first one.
Great.
Let's see. So the question here says that is about the thing you were talking about with the impact of financial engineering being fractured organizations. And the question is, as an R&D leader, how do I deal with having this fractured organization?
Yeah, I think it's a huge problem. And I think actually probably the biggest problem that companies face. And it's also tied to kind of gaps in experience, where you have a lot of more seasoned researchers who have a lot of really kind of implicit knowledge of how to run an R&D organization or how to run an R&D project more so than even an organization. And I think what you really need to do here is, there are knowledge management systems, capture systems, where you basically capture the data from a project, that sort of stuff. I haven't seen any of them that are really all that good, but you can do that. But what's really, really hard for people to capture, and what you really lose when people leave and then these fractured organizations, is kind of this implicit knowledge, again, about how do you run a project, or kind of the intuition part of it says, yeah, this seems like a good opportunity or not. Those are really critical things. And again, I think in this fractured organization time, people are losing those. So I think in that area, I think there's a lot of things you can do to really try to capture that implicit knowledge, kind of beyond traditional knowledge management. There's a particular thing that I really love that goes back to actually the 70s in architecture called pattern language, which shows that there's kind of these patterns that keep repeating over and over and over again. And I've certainly seen that with clients like across different industries, different markets, different technologies, different industries, that you see these same basic patterns over and over and over again, but they're not really captured. And I think using pattern language, you can capture these things. I think it's a really kind of exciting way to kind of bridge and get beyond this fractured organization.
Is there this is my own question, but is there a pattern language tool out there, or do you think that's an opportunity?
Yeah, well, yes and no. In general, yes, you can look at pattern language. There's kind of ways about how you create patterns, and there's rules, and there's a lot of text around it. But I have seen no really good pattern language devoted to new product development, for this kind of space. I'm actually trying to create that, and I'm actually really interested to work with clients to really flesh that out. And I think, so I think although it doesn't exist, I think we can create it.
Oh, it sounds like a robot AI type of problem.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, let's get to the next question. The next question is about the Lux Competitive Benchmark that you showed previously. The question is asking, does this analysis mean that if I spend more on R&D, my financial results will be better?
Yeah, it's great. No, it's a great question. And certainly how I presented the LCB certainly suggests that. But there's more subtlety to it. So what I showed you was a plot for kind of these global, big, diversified companies, right? And again, you've seen that general pattern. But if you look at, we also in the report that we wrote on looking at the large chemical companies using the LCB, we looked at something like 40 companies. And out of that, if you just plot all those 40 companies, it's much more kind of like a shotgun blast, right? There really aren't any correlations. And the reason for that is you have companies like commodity companies. You know, some company who's making basically ethylene or BTX, those sorts of things, commodity chemicals. And for them, there really isn't a correlation with innovation effort and business performance, right? So for those companies, so what it really depends on, so it's not about just spending more money or doing more innovation. It's really about right-sizing your innovation effort. So if you're a commodity player, yes, you still have to innovate, but you have to put a lot less effort into it, right? You're not developing new applications. You're not doing that sort of stuff. You're focusing on, manufacturing excellence and things like that. So I think the answer is it really depends on what kind of company you are, and that part of it and what markets you're in will then tell you really the right amount to spend.
It sounds like if folks want to know more, they should probably call you and ask
you,
depending on their situation.
Yes. There's a lot more. There's a lot more than what I show.
Very nuanced. The next question I see here is asking about product innovation. So I think this is related to your question about the different ways of innovating and about how product is one of them. But the question here talks about, with all the big changes in the world, such as new digital products, energy transition, doesn't that seem to imply that there is actually going to be a demand for new material products? And the thing you talked about, the days of nylon, et cetera, are over.
Yeah, in a way, I kind of overstate that to be a little provocative. And it's not that traditional product innovation is going to go completely away. But the opportunities to really influence your top line, to have really big products, those are few and far between. The kind of product innovation we mostly see today is kind of tweaking chemical formulation to make it a little bit better, things along those lines. So the volumes associated with that are small. They're relatively niche products. And if you look at the opportunities for kind of these new materials, things like graphene, to really get to be $1 billion or a $5 billion business, again, to grow, to be big enough, again, that it really moves their needle, it's not that they're not going to exist. It's not that they're not going to be there, but their frequency, it's not what it was historically. There's not going to be that many of them. And if all you're doing is trying to look for these big new products, you're going to fail. You're just going to waste a lot of R&D. So I think kind of the real challenge, or one of the real challenges, is how do you continue to look and kind of prospect for those big new opportunities? And when it happens, like maybe once every 5 years or once every decade, there's a new product that you can participate that. How do you do that while continuing to do these kind of non-product innovation? You need to kind of do it all.
So you're, if I'm interpreting what you're saying, it's almost like the low-hanging fruit has all been picked. And now, occasionally, you might find one of those low-hanging fruit.
That gets like why I say, that's actually kind of, although it makes it difficult from a innovation perspective, it's a mature business. And I mean, that is a really good thing. It's a really positive thing. The industry has done a great job of meeting customer needs. So it's really hard to come up with another really new big thing because what you have is already pretty darn good.
Makes sense. So we have time for one last question, and the one that's up on top here, it's actually related to your answer to the previous question. The question is about graphene and other new materials and what you see as opportunities for growth in that space.
I think Lux is pretty bullish on graphene for this year. It's taken a while to develop, so I think that's one area that's that's a potential new chemical, potential new material. Again, the question is not, it's been out, it's been commercial. The question really is, again, when is it going to be big enough to really make an impact? So if you're somebody like, again, a really big chemical company, let's say you're BASF, you're an $80 billion a year company, right? So for you to really have an impact, for a new thing to really have an impact, if you can't create $1 billion business in the next 5 years, it's not that you shouldn't do it, but it's just not that interesting. So maybe graphene, maybe some of these kind of new bio-based polymers like PEF, maybe. So again, I think those opportunities exist, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of them. So again, you need to play in those positions when you can, but if that's what you're counting on, you're going to have a lot of years of being in the desert and not generating income from your R&D.
Well, thank you, Matt, for a great presentation and insightful answers to these tough questions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all of the questions today. So if you submitted a question that we didn't answer, we will follow up with you directly. If you'd still like to submit a question, you can email us directly at questions@luxresearchinc.com, and we will send out the presentation after the webinar. And then, of course, if you found today's presentation inspiring or interesting, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, and make sure to follow Lux Research on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, or our blog for ongoing information and insights. And you can always contact us to learn more about how we can help you drive growth through tech innovation for your organization.